In today's video I'm going to be painting these binoculars using the new colour markers from AK Interactive. Let's get started with this piece right here. I'll need to apply a couple of coats, and well, I'm wearing a glove to make sure I don't get the pieces dirty. Let's start by painting the interior surfaces. Trying to get a good coat of paint over everything. As you can see, I've finished painting the interior parts, and now I'm going to start on the outside. You need to hold the tip as flat as possible to cover as much of the surface in one pass as you can. Try to apply the paint in one smooth motion, as that will avoid leaving too many streaks. Right, I've finished applying the first coat to one of the legs, and I'll carry on with the other one now. As you can see, the flexible tip means it gets into all the nooks and crannies and covers everything very well. Okay, I've applied a second coat to this piece now, and I will need to do a second coat on this other one here. I'm going to need to invent a way to hold the small parts so I can paint them properly. You can use toothpicks or whatever you like to hold the piece more comfortably. Now I'm just going to wait for it to dry before applying the next coat of paint. I'm going to use the dark wash for dark yellow. I will be diluting it with a little bit of our two thinners, the fast dry thinner and the matte effect thinner, and I'll also add a little bit of oil. You might use a reddish oil or a dark brown one, whichever you think is most appropriate. Before applying the wash, you should stir it a little because it tends to settle when left sitting still. Then you just need to take a bit on the brush and let it flow into all the gaps, as you can see here. Some of the parts have already dried, so now I want to start cleaning the wash. When applying the wash, it's very important not to use too much, because the less you use, the less you will need to clean off afterwards, obviously. So start cleaning off the wash to remove the excess. Remember to keep cleaning your brush so you don't just end up moving the dirt from one place to another. And this is how the pieces are looking now. They have some depth, but there is still a bit more to be done. I want to apply a bit of dry brushing now. I highlighted all the grooves with the wash, and now I'm going to highlight all the ridges with the dry brushing. I usually use a piece of denim to rub the brush because it works for me. It's tough, it lasts nicely, and cleans the brush when you rub it without leaving fluff on the brush itself. So dip the brush in the paint and then dry it until there is practically no paint left on it. Then apply the product lightly and smoothly. If you see there is still too much paint on the brush, just take some off. Can you see here how the ridges and reliefs have been highlighted nicely? The next step is to create some small chips in the paint. Here is a piece I've already finished. Just look at the corners and the ridges. I'm mainly doing this with a very pointy brush, okay? I use a 0 brush and some acrylic paint. I use these two to be precise. A mixture of one colour, which could easily be black, but I had this one to hand, and this dark rust. I make a couple of mixtures and use them both at the same time. You want to apply them in the areas most prone to paint chipping, like the ridges, the corners, etc. And they need to be very small. I'm going to use a very small piece of sponge to create a different type of paint chipping effect with another colour. I will use an orangey brown for that. You need to take your piece of sponge and dry it off very well. I want to apply it to the areas that would be in contact with the ground, those that would be worn the most and even rusty. This will help to create a base ready for the rust effects later on. You need to take care with the sponge and not go over the top. I'm going to apply the effect in this area and around the legs, which slot into the other parts of the leg later on. Go up to about the halfway point more or less. I'll touch up this area with oils later. Here's my mix of matte effect and fast dry thinners. I apply them with this type of brush. I don't use synthetic brushes because the tips wear out quickly, faster than Kolinsky brushes anyway. These are a little more expensive, but they last a little longer. As you can see, I make the mixtures on a piece of cardboard to create the colours I'm looking for. Applying them is simple, and you can do so as you see fit. I apply them kind of without thinking, intuitively. That might be a little complicated for you, but, well, at the end of the day, it's just a question of practice. I go from area to area, changing colour as I go. Don't mix them all together, but instead do one area completely and then move on to the next. I'm going to keep weathering this piece here. If you look closely at the ridges on the top and close to the paint chips, I've applied very light yellow acrylic to create a kind of 3D effect. There are small scratches in some areas, and next to the dark paint chips you'll see some lighter areas, which I've created to enhance that paint chipping effect. You need to be very precise with the brush, okay? The paint should be quite liquid, and all you want to do is create very small dots next to the paint chips. The idea is to achieve some orangey tones on the piece that will highlight certain areas where rust might occur. Can you see that the end of the leg is a little more orange than the rest? Well, I've achieved that with these oil colours. As always, make a mixture on the cardboard and then simply apply the paint. The beginning of the end, you might say, is when you start applying the pigments. As you can see, I put all the colours into one container and they get mixed up as I go, okay? Depending on what I want, I take pigment from one part or another, dark from the darker area, light from the lighter area, something in the middle, etc. Applying them is as simple as taking an older brush like this one and adding the pigment to the piece as you see fit. At the end of the day, you just want to create the impression of dust and dirt in these areas. Before putting all the pieces together, I want to apply the metal effects. For that, I use a standard pencil like this one, the gunmetal pencil from AK of course, a graphite stick, and then to blend them all in together I use a paper smudger or cotton buds. Once it's ready, what do you have to do? Well, just start blending them all together. Just look at the edge here, how it shines. That is exactly the effect you want to achieve. And this is the final result. I hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for more.